Hello humans, Master Dinnerflex here, bringing you the low quality content you deserve, and today I will be going to update that anti-meta chaos control stun deck from earlier. So last time, something I wanted to do and just kind of forgot is I wanted to do some replays, so you're seeing a bit before and a bit after, to kind of give you a feel of how this deck works, because I think the last video I did was really only half of an explanation of how this deck worked. And that is the case where I modernized a very old deck, and I was explaining modernizing that deck, when the reality is, even if you just ignore that part, there's still some stuff I need to explain, which is why this is probably one of the, this is a fairly quick update on how this deck works and what it does and why it does what it does. So let's get into it. We got 3 Ecclesia, 3 Witch of the Black Forest, and 3 Diabellstar, the main starters of this deck list. Each one of them is a very low impact, low investment, but fairly high power starter. Ecclesia gives you access to either Punishment or Fleur-de-Lis, which is either a double pop or pop and bonus effect, or a negate an extra deck monster while having some beaters on board. Which can get you Silent Magician, which can negate a spell, or it can get you an Effect Veiler if you already had some bonus starters. And then Diabellstar allows you to access a very specific Sinful Spoils package, which is, it's 3 Wanted and then Silvera. You basically just cycle these over and over again with this package. So those are the 3 starters. Then we got 2 Effect Veiler. They're the only hand trap in the deck list, simply because this deck list is not trying to hand trap the opponent. There's not a benefit to doing it in this kind of deck. Like, if you toss 3 hand traps to stunt 1 turn of your opponent, you can't actually capitalize on it in any meaningful way. So you're just kind of throwing away half your hand, and you don't accomplish much of anything. Which is why, instead, there's a lot of traps in here. And I'll explain the traps, because the way the choices of traps are probably the most important thing about understanding how this deck works. But, the only reason you're even playing a hand trap is because Witch needs something to search if you don't want or need Silent Magician. And if you, run into another Silent Magician, run into another Witch after using it, it doesn't lose just absolutely all of its value. It can still do something. Then one Silent Magician explained it. This is one of the only search targets that Sangan and Witch can search that can be relevant going into your opponent's turn. Kind of like the Crusadia tuner back in the day for Sangan. It's just you can't activate the effects of the card, but you can special summon them, and Silent Magician being a spell for your opponent, spell negate for your opponent's turn, is really nice. Plus, You can just summon it, and it be a big beater going second. Like, that comes up quite a bit. Next, we got Blazing Cartesia. This is probably one of the most important cards in the deck list, even though it's one of. Because you're not trying to use it as a starter, because the only time you want to see it is if you already have a play, and this can get an additional play. Like, you can dump Lilith with Nadir's Servant, or use Fusion Deployment after using some of these starters, and that's when you want to see it. You don't just want to start with this. But it is very important once we get to these final monsters, and I'll explain. Fleur-de-Lis, like I explained with Ecclesia, Diabellstar Vengeance is maybe the reason this deck operates as functionally high as it does for whatever reason. This is a Chaos deck, but you only see one Chaos monster in here. Well, I mean, if you really think about it, this is another Chaos monster, because it banishes a Light and Dark, but instead of being monsters, it banishes a Spell and Trap. So that's a Chaos monster, right? This is like functionally a Chaos monster in how it operates, where it does need setup and it does need commitment, but when you do it, you're just given so much. This is particularly powerful. It can give you access to Legacia or Lulu Lilith when you have another Diabellstar up, and it just being a continuous source of pops feels like a more complete version of the entire Dinomorphia deck with how it operates. So this card is very powerful, but it is, because you're just paying half over and over again, you do have to use like some brain power to know when it's correct to actually pop something. Then finally, Chaos Nephthys. Technically the first/second Chaos monster in this deck. The BLS and like Dragon earlier, they were only in there for a sense of obligation. But to make this deck actually proper and the most efficient version of itself, this is the only Chaos monster you need, because this is what makes it so important. So Blazing Cartesia is always going to summon Granganarl, and this is most of the time, especially turn 1, going to dump Chaos Nephthys. There's not a lot of value dumping a Garua unless the situation you just have everything you need, or in very specific circumstances where you need to use it as a trap, you'll dump Malong. But outside of that, you're going to dump Chaos Nephthys, and that will allow it to where if a card on the field is popped under any circumstance, the Chaos Nephthys is coming out and it's just ripping apart your opponent's graveyard and banishing a thing on the field. And against decks like Fiendsmith or just any graveyard setup, it's so unbelievably devastating to just have a recurring like graveyard eraser. That's why I think like this is the most complete. Like everything I wanted all the Chaos monsters to do, Nephthys just does, but unlike the other Chaos monsters, this one is even relevant going first, which I guess is like the problem all the other Chaos monsters have, is that like they're follow-up cards, but Nephthys is designed to complement your turn 1 and an anti-meta deck, which is so important, which is why this is like the only Chaos monster you really need. So that's it for the monsters. I will give a suggestion where it's due. One of the packages you can play that complements this kind of playstyle is Fiendsmith, which is kind of weird to say, but I wasn't the biggest fan for the simple reason this extra deck may look like a bunch of goop, but it is very tight, and Fiendsmith just requires so many slots, and it does so in a way that it kind of burns out a lot quicker than some of the other engines. So, like, it's an option, and you can definitely replace, like, one of these 3. I would not replace this, personally. But, you can definitely do that. Because the engine does make it dark with the level 6 fusion, contact fusion thing. For the spells, 3 Wanted, 3 Nadir's Servant, 2 Fusion Deployment, and 2 Snake Eyes Chase. So, all these spells are just access to more monsters, and the reason you're doing this is simply so you can create food for Vengeance. As simple as that. Dramatic Snake Eye is nice because it allows you to get access to this card without ever, like, sending it and banishing or going Wanted when you want to get a normal Diabellstar. You can just activate this, put this in the back row, and then banish it to bring it out. So you'll have, like, Diabell and Diabell, which allows you to make the 12 synchro, get a pop, have your Omni, and then this will be an additional pop and draw, and like, yeah, you get the point. Like, this is a really nice starter. Fusion Deployment's nice because not only can you get Cartesia, but you can also get Witch. While you can't link it off, if you have a Diabellstar or a Cartesia to go with it, It does just mean you can like fuse it or send it away to get the search regardless, which is nice. And because this deck isn't really that fixated on how it gets in the extra deck, like you can, these synchros only ever be made on your opponent's turn, so it doesn't matter there. This is only stopped if you have no other play, so that doesn't matter. And then like Typhon, you just know how to use your interaction. So that, like, this extra deck is, it's weird because it's very tight, but it is very specific on its utilization, so this really doesn't have a downside in here. For the traps, this is what's going to need the most explaining. So we'll start off 2 punishment. They're searchable, double pop, all the bonus and cool stuff. Silvera is an Omni-Negate that allows Diabellstar to be a cyclical engine because Diabellstar sets this, and then when you send off Diabellstar, it brings itself back to get a Sinful Spoils. Sinful Spoils will get another Diabellstar, which will then banish itself, put this back in the deck, draw 1 card, and the Diabellstar will summon itself again to set this. So it's a constantly repeating Omni-Negate every turn. It's basically Guru control attached to a much better body that is way more proactive, which is hilarious. But yeah, and then the bonus trap you want to go with this engine is Morian, because all the other normal traps are way too specified on how they're used, whereas Morian can at least always be a trap, even if you draw it with nothing else to do, which is important. And then finally, Crackdown for the non-counter traps. This can just take an opponent's monster away. It can have some really cool applications if you have Cartesia up, because if you like take a Light Dark, you can just fuse it away. One of the cool stuffs about Crackdown is if the monster leaves the field, it destroys Crackdown, which does mean it is live for Chaos Nephthys. So sometimes you can just like you can send off a Diabellstar for Silvera, send away the monster, Crackdown explodes, and then Chaos Nephthys comes out, and that's like some really cool applications. So that's pretty cool. And you just want these to be like synergetic with the counter traps you're about to see here. So this is something about this deck that probably needs the most explaining because it is deceptively complex. Like, most Yu-Gi-Oh players, when they think, oh, there's just a bunch of traps in this deck, so you just turn your brain off. No, that's not what's going on here. So counter traps are spell speed 3, as most of you know, which means nothing changed to them except counter traps. So a lot of the problems I was noticing when trying to build like an anti-meta deck is like, it is so easy for like a decent deck to just interact with your interaction. Like, they can chain a quick play, they can chain one of their malice traps, they can chain a bestial, they can chain something to just make it not matter. And it was happening so often, I was beginning to wonder if it's correct to just have counter traps in here and like accept sometimes they'll just be slightly less live. And the answer was yes. A lot of the times when you just hit a malice monster with the counter trap, all their sets get turned off. They can quickly lose so much momentum by just like negating the summon of a link monster. You can really punish someone for like just like a spell speed 3 negation that turns it off, destroys the card, can put your opponent so like it's such a complete stop in so many ways that it felt like I was using 2 to 3 trap cards and or like multiple hand traps. These cards were so effective at like stopping these combos and stopping these chain of effects that it's like, damn, I should start putting more counter traps in other decks. That's what they're kind of in here for. So if you activate like a punishment and they go to chain some stupid crap, if you hit it with a counter trap card, that's it. They have nothing else to benefit from it. They can't chain another thing to it. So like a lot of their lines of effects just kind of fade away. Like, they don't have any means to continue. So like basically it's kind of like what we were doing back in 21, where you would use a counter trap card in trap decks to stop Herald of Perfection and Drytron. You're kind of just doing that now, but for everything, because everything has so many chainable responses to your chainable responses. If you just speed up what the spell speed is, you can kind of just turn it off. Not to mention, Solemn Strike can trigger Chaos Nephthys, this can trigger Chaos Nephthys. Like, there's so much synergy. They benefit so much from your interactions that are already on board. There's just a lot. Which is what makes these cards so powerful in this deck and why they're so important. It's not just about having a bunch of trap cards. It's about the trap cards you have being, like, really a hard stop in a way that not even floodgates feel like it. So having a card that just says, no, the chain link ends here is very powerful. And that's it for the main deck. For the side deck, I won't go into it much. The only cards I would suggest are Broken Line, Ultimate Slayer, Judgment, and the Philia Diabellstar package. This is kind of weird because this card is much better when you know you're going second, because you can just summon this out and get a pop, and it kind of like forces like a banker top situation where they have to really be careful of how they use their interactions, because this can just trade for multiple cards. And if this is summoned out, like, Diabellstar can still summon itself out of the graveyard with its actual effect, which is nice. And then you can do Diabellstar with this package if you want to. I don't know. I don't think this card's very helpful in here. Like, you're going to have to send off a spell or trap to use it, which all of these are fairly high value. And then, unless it just happened to have everything for Vengeance, you're dumping Morion, which, sure, it can set itself because it's an illusion. But, like, you traded a trap for a different trap, and that's just not super helpful. But regardless, these are the rest I would suggest. And Broken Line and Judgment, they're obvious for the same reason, like you're playing so many counter traps, just in the chain link right there. But this one's much better for going second than others. And this one's better for going first than others. And that allows you to have, like, 6 Solemn Judgments in main. For the extra deck, 2 Ints, the most important punishment target itself. Malong, explained earlier, it's another target you can play, but it's actually important for Granganarl, so if you have to fuse and treat it as a trap on your opponent's turn, you can with Malong. Aggregator, it's another punishment target that's especially good against Ryziel, because if they go ice, you can pop the ice and then send this to do it, and then the monster they summon just going to get negated with Aggregator. But it's also just to make sure Slayer has a real target against that same deck in question. Garura, which allows your opponent, basically another fusion, and it allows your Nadir Servant to also be engaged. And then Bucephalus, which is, it allows your punishment to be bigger, and also just creates more darks, because if this deck lacks an attribute, it's actually dark. Even though there's, like, plenty of darks in the deck list, Diabellstar puts itself back on the field from the grave, so it doesn't get to count that often. So having a Bucephalus, dump a Garura, puts 2 darks in there, and that can be very helpful, because this deck is very good at getting a bunch of lights engraved, but it kind of struggles with the dark half, and having just a monster that is 2 helps. Then we got the fusion deployment targets, 2 Granganarl, which you actually summon and use, and the reason you're playing 2 is because Cartesia puts itself back in hand, you kind of need to make that matter, because if you only play 1, you fuse 1, and then it comes back, it doesn't do anything, it's just a tuner. And you're not really playing the synchros to benefit from that super hard. Like, you can use it, but it kind of just doesn't matter. So having another fusion target is actually much more relevant. Then we got Sandwich. So, like, if you open Fusion Deployment and Cartesia, or Fusion Deployment and Diabellstar, you can just summon out Witch and get your search with it that way. So it's just like an obligation target. And then we got Lulu Lilith. Not only is it like a punishment and a deer target, but it's also a synchro you can synchro summon with the package we're going to show up soon. And it's just a very specified Omni Negate, which is nice. Then we got Poplar of the White Forest, which all it is this gets summoned out from Vengeance when you have both it and the OG Diabellstar up. It allows you to turn Vengeance and itself into Legacia or Lulu Lilith if you need to. And this will be an additional pop and a draw. So you'll, like, get a pop here, draw a card, and then you'll still have your Black Witch, which probably still has the benefit of the Omni Negate, which is very nice. Then finally, the 2 links, we got Artemis, which all it does is if your starter is Witch, you link it off, and that allows you to search Silent Magician, and it creates an extra deck monster, so you can special summon Ecclesia as well. Then we got SP for the situations that rarely call for it. It is like the 15th extra deck slot, but it is kind of relevant. And then finally, Typhon, which is a card this is going to sound weird. I think this is the worst good card to ever be printed in this game's history. I think the circumstances in which you summon it means you've lost in 90% of games. Because if you put this in a normal deck, you're doing it because it's your last possible play. You're going to bounce something, but you're not going to deal with any of the follow-up. And because Modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Isn't about, like, trap cards, it's about hand traps. That means, like, your opponent's just going to play normally during their follow-up, and you had to already use your hand traps because you were going second. So there's very rarely situations where this pulls through. However, there are two exceptions. If you're playing actual trap cards, the entire circumstance of how and why this card is summoned is completely different. Because now this card can be backed up by, like, really crazy stuff, and you can actually punish their follow-up, even though you're doing less to their inboard. And the other situation is where you're, like, stealing their monsters, and that one's pretty funny. But that's it for the deck list. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. I still got more replays to show off. Hopefully I did a better explanation of how this deck operates, and the replays kind of give you a better understanding of what you're expected to do with this deck. I think it's a very cool anti-meta deck. Yeah, there's not much to say. It's a 13-year-old deck that was updated and became something new and interesting. But that's going to be it for me. Thank you all for watching, and remember, Master Nephthys will take your soul.